We gave your wedding fund to your sister. She deserves a real wedding. Dad said it like he was proud. I didn't cry. I just looked at my fiancé Marcus, who had been quietly cutting his pot roast throughout this whole Sunday dinner disaster. He set down his fork, stood up, and pulled out his phone. "Should I tell them what I do for a living?" he asked in that calm voice I'd grown to love. My sister Paige's confident smile disappeared completely. The silence stretched across our dining room table like a chasm. Mom's casserole dish sat between us, steam still rising from the green bean almondine she'd made specially for this family dinner. I could hear the grandfather clock in the hallway ticking away the seconds as my brain tried to process what Dad had just announced. "Lynn, honey, don't look at us like that," Mom said, her voice taking on that patronizing tone she used when she thought I was being unreasonable. "We talked about this extensively. Your father and I feel this is the best decision for the family." So, I found my voice, though it came out smaller than I intended. "The best decision, that's $25,000 we've been saving for 3 years. You promised me that money when I got engaged." Dad leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms over his blue flannel shirt. At 55, he still had the broad shoulders of the construction foreman he'd been for 20 years, and he used his physical presence to dominate conversations just like he dominated job sites. "Lynn, let's be realistic here. You've been struggling financially since college. We've had to help you with rent twice this year. You chose to be a teacher instead of pursuing something more practical like your sister did. Paige works in real estate. She's engaged to Brett, who has connections in the investment world. They're building something substantial." Paige reached over and patted my hand with fake sympathy. "I told them not to take your money, Lynn. I really did. But they insisted I deserve a proper celebration. Brett's family expects a certain level of wedding. You know, his father owns that investment firm downtown, and they belong to the country club. There will be judges and city council members at our reception." Brett, sitting smugly beside my sister, adjusted his designer tie. He always dressed like he was heading to a board meeting, even for family dinners. "My firm handles portfolios worth millions. The wedding will be a networking opportunity as well as a celebration. We've already put deposits down at the Riverside Country Club for next June. The venue alone costs $15,000, not including catering." I felt my chest tightening as the familiar pattern emerged. Everything always came back to what Paige deserved, what Paige had accomplished, what Paige needed. I glanced at Marcus, who was listening intently, but hadn't said anything since his initial question. "What about what I deserve?" I asked, my voice gaining strength. "I've been teaching for 6 years. I've never asked you for anything except help with rent during those 2 months when the school district delayed our paychecks due to budget issues." Mom jumped in quickly. "Sweetie, we're not saying you don't deserve happiness, but Marcus seems like such a nice, practical man. He drives that reliable Honda, lives in that cute little apartment on Maple Street. He works at some computer company, right? I'm sure you two can have a lovely small ceremony. Maybe something in our backyard. I could make the cake myself." The condescension in her voice made my skin crawl. They'd never asked Marcus detailed questions about his work, never shown real interest in getting to know him. They'd made assumptions based on his modest lifestyle and left it at that. Brett leaned forward, clearly enjoying his moment to lecture. "Real estate is booming right now. Paige sold 4 houses last month alone. My investment portfolio has grown 30% this year. We're looking at buying a second property in the mountains for weekend getaways. That's the kind of planning that builds generational wealth." "And you, Lynn," Dad continued, "you'll always have your teaching job. It's stable, predictable, but it's not exactly going to make you wealthy. Marcus seems like a good man who'll provide a steady life. You don't need some extravagant wedding. You need to be practical about your future." "Aicho." Paige nodded enthusiastically. Exactly. Besides, you've always been more of the simple type, Lynn. Remember when we were kids, you were happy with library books while I was planning fashion shows in my bedroom. This just makes sense for everyone's personality. So. I watched my family systematically tear down my worth, reduce my relationship to something small and insignificant while elevating Paige's choices as superior in every way. The pattern was so familiar, it felt like a worn groove in my heart, but this time felt different. This time, they'd crossed a line. Marcus finally spoke, his voice still calm, but with an edge I rarely heard. Frank, what exactly do you think I do at my computer company? Dad shrugged. I don't know, tech support programming, one of those internet jobs. And you think that means I can't provide properly for Lynn? Son, I'm not trying to insult you, Dad said, though his tone suggested otherwise. I'm just being realistic about finances. Construction pays well, but I know what white-collar desk jobs pay around here. You seem like a good kid, but Paige and Brett are operating on a different financial level. That's when Marcus smiled, and I recognized the expression. It was the same quiet confidence he showed when someone underestimated him, which happened more often than people realized. He dressed simply, drove a practical car, and lived modestly by choice, not necessity. But my family had never bothered to look deeper. I see, Marcus said, pulling out his phone. So you gave away Lynn's wedding fund because you assume I'm not successful enough to deserve a real wedding. Is that accurate? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Brett shifted uncomfortably, suddenly aware that something was about to change. Should I tell them what I do for a living? Marcus repeated his earlier question, and this time his thumb was hovering over his phone screen. Dad's confident expression faltered slightly. What do you mean? Marcus's thumb moved, and suddenly he was showing Dad his phone screen. I'm CEO and founder of TechFlow Solutions. We design and implement software systems for major construction companies, manufacturing plants, and logistics operations. We employ 530 people across 4 states. So. The silence that followed was deafening. I watched Dad's face go through several color changes as recognition dawned. He knew that company name. Every major construction firm in the region had heard of TechFlow Solutions. Wait, Dad said slowly, leaning forward to look at the phone screen more closely. TechFlow is your company. The TechFlow that handles all the scheduling software for Morrison Construction. Marcus nodded calmly. Among others, yes. We just signed a contract with the State Highway Department for their entire project management overhaul. The deal was announced in the Business Journal last month. Brett's smugness evaporated as he realized the implications. Paige's confident smile crumpled into confusion. Mom's hand flew to her mouth in shock. Dad stared at Marcus like he was seeing him for the first time. But you drive a Honda. You live in that little apartment. I like my Honda. It's reliable. And I rent the apartment because I travel frequently for business and don't want the maintenance responsibilities of ownership right now. I prefer to invest my money rather than display it. The family dinner had just shifted completely, and everyone knew it. The awkwardness that settled over our dining room felt thick enough to cut with a knife. Dad kept staring at Marcus's phone screen like it might change if he looked long enough. Mom had gone completely silent, which never happened during family gatherings. Brett was the first to recover, though his voice had lost its earlier confidence. Well, that's interesting. What kind of revenue does a company like that generate annually? Marcus slipped his phone back into his pocket without answering directly. We do well enough. The software industry has been good to us. I bet it has, Brett said, forcing a laugh that sounded hollow. I mean, I work with tech investments sometimes. It's a volatile market, though, very unpredictable compared to real estate and traditional investments. I could see Brett trying to maintain his position as the family's financial expert, but the foundation had already cracked. Marcus simply nodded politely, not taking the bait. Dad cleared his throat loudly, clearly struggling with this new information. Marcus, son, why didn't you ever mention this before? We've been having dinner together for 8 months. You never asked, Marcus replied simply. Lynn and I don't define our relationship by career achievements or income levels. I thought that was clear from how we spend our time together. Mom jumped up suddenly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. Oh my goodness, Marcus, sweetheart, let me get you some more coffee. And there's apple pie for dessert. I made it from scratch this morning. The sudden shift to calling him sweetheart wasn't lost on anyone. 5 minutes ago, she'd been talking about backyard weddings and homemade cakes. Now she was treating him like visiting royalty. That's very kind of you, Carol, but I'm fine, Marcus said, though his politeness felt more formal than usual. Paige had been unusually quiet, but now she leaned forward with that calculating look she got when she was strategizing. This is actually wonderful news for the whole family. I mean, we're all connected now, right? Maybe there are ways we could all benefit from having such a successful businessman in the family. The naked opportunism in her voice made my stomach turn. She wasn't even trying to hide it. What do you mean by that, Ho? I asked, though I already knew where this was heading. Well, Brett's always looking for investment opportunities. And Marcus, you probably need real estate services for your business expansion. We could keep everything in the family. Brett nodded enthusiastically, his earlier defensiveness forgotten. Absolutely. My firm specializes in high net worth clients. We could discuss portfolio diversification strategies, maybe some municipal bonds, some overseas investments. Marcus listened to this pitch with the same polite attention he'd give to any cold caller. I appreciate the thought, but I have established financial advisors who handle my personal investments. Of course, Brett said quickly. I just meant if you ever wanted a second opinion or if your business needs any financial consulting. Dad was still processing the revelation, running his hand through his graying hair. TechFlow Solutions. Jesus, Marcus, I've heard Frank Morrison talk about your software. He says it revolutionized how they track project timelines. We try to solve real problems for real businesses, Marcus said modestly. This changes everything, Dad said, suddenly looking around the table like he was seeing it for the first time. I mean, we need to reconsider the wedding situation. Maybe we were hasty. Now it was my turn to feel angry. Hasty, 20 minutes ago, you were explaining why I didn't deserve the money you promised me. Now that you know Marcus is successful, suddenly everything's different. Lynn, honey, don't be dramatic, Mom said, settling back into her chair with a nervous laugh. We were just trying to be practical. Now that we know more about the situation, of course we can adjust our thinking. Adjust your thinking about what? About whether I'm worth keeping promises to, about whether my relationship deserves respect. Paige jumped in quickly, sensing the conversation turning against her. Look, maybe we can work something out where everybody wins. Since we're all family and promises were made to both of us, maybe we could split the fund. Half for my wedding, half for yours. The suggestion hung in the air, and I could see her watching everyone's faces for reactions. She was trying to salvage her perfect wedding while appearing generous. Actually, Paige continued, warming to her theme. Since Lynn has Marcus's resources, now maybe I should keep the full amount. Promises were made after all, and my vendors are already contracted. It would be unfair to back out now when Lynn has other options. The audacity of it took my breath away. Even after learning about Marcus's success, even after realizing how wrong they'd been about our situation, she still felt entitled to money that had been promised to me first. Marcus's expression didn't change, but I noticed his hand tighten slightly around his water glass. Paige, just to clarify, are you suggesting that Lynn should give up her wedding fund because I'm financially successful? Well, when you put it like that, it sounds bad, Paige said with a forced laugh. I just mean that she has options now that she didn't have before. It's about being practical for everyone involved. Practical, Marcus repeated thoughtfully. Let me ask you something, Brett. You mentioned your father's investment firm. What's the name of it? Brett straightened up, clearly pleased to be asked. Hartwell and Associates. They've been serving clients in this area for 15 years. Hartwell and Associates, Marcus said slowly. Downtown office building, third floors. That's right. You know it. Marcus nodded. I know Frank Hartwell. Good reputation in the community. How many investment advisors work there? It's a boutique firm, small personalized service. 3 advisors total, including my father. And you're one of the 3? Brett's enthusiasm dimmed slightly. Well, I'm working toward that. Right now, I'm more of an associate advisor, but Dad's planning to make me a full partner next year. Marcus asked his next question very casually. And the boat you've been posting pictures with on social media, the yacht you mentioned for weekend getaways. Brett's face went red. That's Dad's boat, but I have access to it whenever we want to use it for entertaining clients. So when you talk about buying a second property in the mountains, that's a future plan, not something you've already done, The questions were gentle but surgical in their precision. I watched Brett's confident facade crumble as Marcus exposed the gaps between his claims and his reality. Look, I'm building my career, Brett said defensively. Rome wasn't built in a day, but my prospects are excellent and Paige and I are planning for a strong financial future. Marcus smiled that polite smile again. Of course, building a career takes time. I just wanted to understand the current situation accurately. The damage was done, though. Brett's status as the family's financial golden boy had been quietly dismantled, and everyone at the table knew it. Dad looked around nervously, finally understanding that the family dynamics had shifted dramatically in the span of one dinner conversation. Maybe we should table the wedding discussion for now, give everyone time to think things through. But I was done thinking. For the first time in my adult life, I could see the family pattern clearly. They made decisions based on their assumptions and prejudices, then expected everyone to go along without question. When their assumptions proved wrong, they wanted to quietly pretend the whole thing never happened. No, Dad, I said firmly. We're not tabling anything. You made a decision about my money based on your judgment of my worth and my fiancé's worth. You were wrong about both, but that doesn't change what you did. It just reveals who you really are. The uncomfortable truth settled over the dinner table like a heavy blanket, and no one seemed to know what to say next. The uncomfortable silence stretched until the grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 7:30. The sound seemed to break some kind of spell, and suddenly everyone was talking at once. Lynn, you're being unfair, Mom said, her voice rising. We were just trying to make the best decisions with the information we had. What information? I shot back. You never asked Marcus about his work. You never showed any interest in getting to know him beyond surface appearances. You made assumptions and acted on them without caring how it affected me. Dad shifted uncomfortably in his chair. We care about you, Lynn. We've always cared about both our daughters equally. And the words hit me like a slap, and suddenly 28 years of memories came flooding back with startling clarity. Equally, Dad, you paid for Paige's entire college education while I took out $40,000 in student loans. You co-signed for her first car while I saved up to buy a 10-year-old Honda. You attended every single one of her real estate awards banquets, but missed my Teacher of the Year ceremony because you had a golf tournament. Those were different circumstances, Mom protested. Paige needed help getting started in real estate. You chose teaching, which has a more predictable income path. I chose teaching because I love it and because it matters, I said, my voice gaining strength. But you've never seen it as valuable because it doesn't make a lot of money. Everything has always been about financial success with you two. When Marcus had been listening carefully to this family history, and now he spoke up with a question that seemed innocent but felt loaded. Brett, tell me more about your investment work. What kind of portfolios do you typically manage? Brett perked up, grateful for the chance to redirect attention to his expertise. We focus on conservative growth strategies, municipal bonds, blue chip stocks, some carefully selected real estate investment trusts. Our average client has portfolios in the mid-six figures. And my nantes. Interesting. And your father's boat, the one you use for client entertainment, what kind of vessel is it? It's a 32-foot Sea Ray, perfect for day trips and small client gatherings. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. I was curious because I noticed some of your social media posts from last month. The yacht in those photos looked much larger, more like a 50 or 60-footer. Brett's confident expression faltered. Oh, those posts. Well, sometimes we partner with other firms for larger client events. That was actually associated with a conference we attended. Nice. I see. So the boat belongs to another firm, but... Right. It was more of a networking opportunity. I watched this gentle interrogation with fascination. Marcus wasn't being aggressive or confrontational, but somehow he was systematically revealing that Brett had been inflating his success and lifestyle. And the mountain property you mentioned earlier, Marcus continued. Brett's face was getting redder by the minute. That's still in the planning stages. We're looking at several options in different price ranges. Paige was starting to look uncomfortable as her fiancé's claims unraveled. Brett, maybe we don't need to go into all the business details right now. But Marcus wasn't finished. Of course. I was just curious because I know the mountain real estate market pretty well. My company has several clients who own properties up there. It's a competitive market right now with most decent properties starting around $400,000 for anything with good access and views. The number hung in the air like a challenge. Brett had been talking about weekend getaways and client entertainment, but his salary as an associate advisor at a 3-person firm couldn't possibly support that kind of purchase. Dad was starting to piece things together, too. Brett, son, are you saying you and Paige can afford a $400,000 vacation home? Well, we're planning for the future, Brett said weakly, building toward that kind of investment capacity. The careful language revealed everything. Just like his father's boat that wasn't really his boat, the mountain property was more aspiration than reality. I felt a strange mix of badness and vindication as I watched my family grapple with these revelations. They'd been so quick to assume Marcus was unsuccessful and Brett was thriving when the reality was exactly opposite. This is why you gave my wedding money to Paige, I said quietly. Mates, you believed Brett's version of success over Marcus's modesty. You assumed that flashy meant substantial and that quiet meant struggling. To me. Mom looked stricken. Lynn, we weren't trying to hurt you. We thought we were being practical. You were being prejudiced. I said the words coming out stronger than I'd intended. You judged Marcus based on his clothes and his car, and you judged me based on my salary. You never looked deeper because you didn't think we were worth the effort. Some lessons. Paige finally spoke up, her voice smaller than usual. I didn't know about Marcus's company. If I had known... What you would have treated him differently. You would have suddenly decided I deserved the wedding fund after all. She didn't answer, but the guilt on her face was answer enough. Marcus reached over and took my hand. Lynn, what do you want to do here? The question was simple but profound. For the first time in this entire conversation, someone was asking what I wanted instead of telling me what I should accept. I want honesty, I said, looking around the table. I want someone in this family to admit that you've treated me as less important than Paige for years, and that this wedding fund situation is just the latest example of that pattern. The silence that followed was different from the earlier awkwardness. This was the silence of people being forced to confront uncomfortable truths about themselves. Dad finally spoke, his voice rough. Lynn, I never meant to make you feel less important. But you did, Dad. Over and over again, you've shown me that Paige's needs come first. Paige's success matters more. Paige's happiness is more valuable than mine. That's not true, he protested, but the words sounded hollow even to him. Then explain the college funding. Explain the car situation. Explain missing my teaching awards. Explain giving away my wedding money to pay for her more important wedding. Each example hit like a physical blow, and I could see Dad struggling to find explanations that didn't sound like excuses. Marcus squeezed my hand gently. Frank, I think what Lynn is saying is that she's felt undervalued by her family for a long time, and this wedding situation has brought all of that to a head. We never meant, Mom started to say, then stopped. What did you mean? I asked. When you decided Paige deserved my money, what exactly did you mean to communicate to me? Yes. The question hung in the air unanswered, and in that silence, I finally understood something important. This wasn't really about the money at all. This was about years of accumulated hurt and disrespect that had finally reached a breaking point. And for the first time in my adult life, I was ready to stop accepting it. The realization hit me like lightning. I was done. Done with being the understanding daughter who accepted less. Done with being grateful for scraps while Paige got the feast. Done with making myself smaller so everyone else could feel bigger. You know what? I said, standing up from the table. I need some air. I walked out to the back porch, leaving behind the murmur of confused voices. The October evening was crisp, and I could smell wood smoke from someone's fireplace down the street. This was the same porch where I'd sat as a child listening to Dad tell Paige she could be anything she wanted while he reminded me to be practical. Where I'd watched them celebrate her achievements while treating mine as expected rather than exceptional. Marcus followed me outside, closing the screen door gently behind him. How are you feeling? Like I've been sleepwalking for 28 years and just woke up. I said, wrapping my arms around myself against the cool air. I keep making excuses for them, telling myself they don't mean to hurt me. But they do mean it, don't they? They genuinely believe Paige is more valuable than I am. What do you think you want to do? I loved that about Marcus. He didn't try to fix my feelings or convince me I was overreacting. He just asked what I wanted. I want to stop pretending this is normal. I want to stop accepting treatment I would never accept from strangers just because they're family. Through the window, I could see my family in heated discussion around the dining room table. Dad was gesturing emphatically while Mom twisted her napkin in her hands. Brett looked miserable, and Paige kept glancing toward the porch. They're in there trying to figure out how to manage this situation, I said. How to smooth things over so we can all pretend nothing happened. And you don't want to pretend? I can't anymore. Marcus, they took money that was promised to me and gave it to my sister because they think she's worth more. Then, when they found out you were successful, they wanted to renegotiate because suddenly I might be worth something after all. Marcus was quiet for a moment, then said, "What if we didn't need their money at all?" "What do you mean?" He smiled, and I saw that mischievous glint that I'd fallen in love with. "What if we just got married without them? What if we planned our own wedding, paid for it ourselves, and didn't ask their permission or approval for anything?" The idea was so simple and so radical that it took my breath away. "You mean elope?" "I mean, get married on our terms. I've been thinking about this actually. There's a beautiful resort in Colorado that specializes in intimate weddings. Mountain views, professional photographers, amazing food. We could invite people who actually support us and leave the drama behind." "You've been thinking about this, say." "Lynn, I've watched your family treat you badly for months. I was hoping tonight's conversation might help them see what they were doing, but honestly, I came prepared for this outcome too." I stared at him in amazement. "You already looked into wedding venues." "I looked into a lots of things. I love you, and I want to marry you, but I don't want our wedding to be overshadowed by family politics and hurt feelings. We deserve better than that." Bong. The screen door opened and Dad stepped onto the porch. "Lynn, can we talk?" Wow. "We are talking, Dad. I mean, can we work this out as a family?" Oh. I turned to face him fully. "What does working it out look like to you?" "Well, we could split the money between you and Paige, 12,500 each. That seems fair." The offer felt like another slap. "Fair, Dad, the money was promised to me 3 years ago. You gave it all to Paige this afternoon. Now you want to split it because you found out Marcus is successful." "Lynn, be reasonable. Paige has already put down deposits. One man name on my one show. With my money. It's complicated now. We're just trying to find a solution that works for everyone." Marcus stepped closer to me. "Frank, can I ask you something? Do you actually believe that what you did tonight was wrong, or are you just trying to manage the consequences?" Dad looked taken aback by the directness of the question. "I think maybe we made some assumptions that turned out to be incorrect." "That's not what I asked. Do you believe it was wrong to take money promised to Lynn and give it to Paige?" "Why, The situation was more complex than that." "No, base," Marcus said firmly. "Lane, it really wasn't. You promised money to one daughter, then gave it to the other daughter without discussing it with the first daughter. That's not complex. That's just wrong." I watched Dad struggle with this simple framing. In his world, he was the patriarch who made decisions for the good of the family. Having his choices labeled as simply wrong was foreign territory. "Son, I think you're oversimplifying things. And I think you're overcomplicating them to avoid admitting you made a mistake." The screen door opened again, and this time the whole family filed onto the porch. Mom looked like she'd been crying. Paige looked defensive, and Brett just looked uncomfortable. "Lynn," Mom said, "we've been talking, and we want you to know that we love you very much. We never meant to hurt you." "But you did hurt me. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" Paige stepped forward. "I think we should call this whole thing off. The wedding fund, I mean. Nobody gets it. We'll all just pay for our own weddings." "Absolutely not," I said immediately. "You don't get to give away my money and then claim the moral high ground by refusing to take it. That money was promised to me. If anyone's going to give it up, it should be me making that choice." "So what do you want?" Paige asked, frustration creeping into her voice. "I want you all to stop trying to negotiate and manipulate your way out of this. I want you to acknowledge that you were wrong. And I want you to understand that this isn't just about money. This is about years of treating me like the consolation prize daughter." The harsh words hung in the evening air. No one tried to argue, which told me everything I needed to know about whether they recognized the truth in what I was saying. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice steady and clear. Marcus and I are getting married next weekend. We're eloping to Colorado. None of you are invited. And the shock on their faces was immediate and complete. Lynn, you can't be serious, Mom gasped. I'm completely serious. I'm 28 years old. I don't need your permission, your money, or your approval to get married. I've spent my whole life trying to earn your respect, and I'm done. I'm going to marry the man I love, and we're going to build a life together based on actual mutual respect and support. Dad found his voice first. You're making a mistake, Lynn. You're letting your emotions make decisions you'll regret. No, Dad. I'm finally letting my emotions have a voice after years of silencing them to keep the peace. This feels like the first right decision I've made in a very long time. Marcus put his arm around me. We should probably head home. We have a lot of planning to do. As we walked toward his car, I heard Paige call after me. Lynn, wait. What about the family? What about us? I turned back one last time. What about you? You got what you wanted. You got the money, you got the blessing, you got the family support. Enjoy your perfect wedding. The drive to my apartment was quiet. I kept expecting to feel regret or doubt, but instead I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, peace. For the first time, I had chosen myself. And it felt absolutely right. The next 3 days were a whirlwind of phone calls, emotional voicemails, and desperate text messages from my family. Dad called 14 times on Monday alone, each message becoming more frantic than the last. Lynn, we need to talk about this rationally. You're destroying the family over money. Sweetheart, this is your mother. Please call me back. We can fix this. Lynn, it's Dad again. I've been thinking about what you said and maybe we were hasty. Call me. I didn't return any of the calls. Tuesday morning, I was setting up my classroom for the day when my principal, Mrs. Chen, knocked on my door. Lynn, you have a visitor in the office. Your father. My heart sank. Dad had never once visited me at school in 6 years of teaching. He'd missed every achievement, every milestone, every invitation to see my classroom. But now that he wanted something from me, suddenly he was willing to make the trip. I found him standing awkwardly in the main office, his work boots and flannel shirt making him look out of place among the motivational posters and children's artwork. The office secretary was eyeing him warily. Dad, what are you doing here? Oh. We need to talk, Lynn. This has gone too far. I'm at work. This is my workplace. 5 minutes. That's all I need. I led him outside to the small courtyard where teachers sometimes ate lunch. The morning air was cold and Dad kept shifting from foot to foot. Your mother is beside herself, he said without preamble. She's barely slept since Sunday. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you, because it seems like you're punishing all of us for trying to do what we thought was best? Nang. I looked at this man who had raised me, who had taught me to ride a bike and helped with homework and walked me down the aisle at my high school graduation, who had also systematically favored my sister for my entire life. Dad, do you remember when I won Teacher of the Year 3 years ago? The change of subject threw him off balance. What does that have to do with anything? Do you remember it? Oh, of course I remember. We were proud of you. You didn't come to the ceremony. I had a work commitment, a golf tournament with potential clients. It was a charity tournament, Dad, and it was on a Saturday. The ceremony was on a Tuesday evening. He was quiet for a moment. I thought your mother went. Mom went, but you've been to every single one of Paige's real estate award banquets. You never missed one. Those were different. How? They were, I don't know, Lynn. They were business events, networking opportunities. And my teaching award wasn't important enough to reschedule golf. I watched him struggle with the implication of what he'd just admitted, that Paige's achievements were business opportunities worth attending while mine were just nice personal accomplishments that could be missed without consequence. I didn't think about it that way, he said finally. That's the problem, Dad. You never think about it. You just assume Paige's life is more important, more valuable, more deserving of support. And when I finally refuse to accept that treatment, you act like I'm the one being unreasonable. The first bell rang, signaling that students would start arriving soon. I needed to get back to my classroom. What do you want me to do, Lynn? How do I fix this? The question caught me off guard. I'd expected him to keep justifying and defending, not to actually ask what I needed. I want you to understand that this isn't about the money, Dad. This is about 28 years of feeling like I'm not quite good enough to deserve the same consideration you give Paige. I want you to acknowledge that and understand why I can't pretend it's okay anymore. And if I do that, if I acknowledge all of that, then what's? Then maybe we can have an honest relationship for the first time in my adult life. I left him standing in the courtyard and went back to my classroom. Through my window, I watched him sit on the concrete bench for another 10 minutes before driving away. That evening, Marcus came over with takeout from our favorite Chinese restaurant. We spread the wedding planning materials across my coffee table venue photos from the Colorado Resort sample menus lists of what we needed to bring. How was your day? He asked, opening the container of Kung Pao chicken. Dad showed up at school. Marcus paused with his chopsticks halfway to his mouth. How did that go? How? Better than expected, actually. I think he might be starting to understand that this is about more than just the wedding fund. My phone buzzed with a text from Paige. Brett and I had a big fight. Can I come over? I showed the message to Marcus. What do you think? It's your call. But if she comes over, we should be clear about boundaries. 20 minutes later, Paige was sitting on my couch looking more deflated than I'd ever seen her. Her usual perfect makeup was smudged, and her designer clothes looked wrinkled. He's being impossible, she said without preamble. Ever since Sunday dinner, Brett's been acting like a completely different person. What do you mean? He's angry all the time, defensive about his job, his family, everything. Last night, he accused me of being embarrassed by him. He said I only cared about his money and status. Oh. I exchanged a glance with Marcus. What brought that on? I think it was the thing with Marcus's company. Brett's been obsessing over it. He keeps talking about how he knew tech was volatile, how real wealth comes from traditional investments. It's like he's trying to convince himself that Marcus isn't as successful as he claims to be. Marcus's success threatened him, I said, understanding dawning. I think so. And when I tried to talk to him about it, he exploded. He said I was just like my family, only caring about appearances and money. He said if I really loved him, it wouldn't matter what Marcus did for a living. The irony wasn't lost on me. Brett was accusing Paige of the same shallow value judgments that our family had been making about Marcus for months. He asked me to prove I love him by eloping, Paige continued. Just the two of us, no big wedding, no family money. He wants me to give up everything we've planned. And what did you say? Paige looked miserable. I said no. I told him we'd already put down deposits, that people were expecting a real wedding, and that's when he really lost it. She was crying now, and despite everything that had happened, I felt a stab of sympathy for her. Paige, can I ask you something? Do you actually want to marry Brett, or do you want to have the wedding you've planned? The question seemed to hit her like a physical blow. She sat in silence for a long time, tears streaming down her face. I don't know anymore, she whispered. I thought I did, but these last few days, watching him get so angry and defensive, seeing how he treats me when his ego is bruised, I don't think I like who he really is. Marcus spoke up gently. Sometimes stress reveals people's true character. Is that what this is? Am I seeing his true character for the first time, Em? What do you think? I asked. I think he's not the man I thought he was, and I think maybe I fell in love with the idea of him rather than the reality. We sat quietly for a few minutes, letting that admission settle. Lynn, Paige said finally, I'm sorry about the money, about everything. I got so caught up in having the perfect wedding that I didn't think about how it affected you. That wasn't fair. It was the first genuine apology I'd heard from my family since Sunday dinner. Thank you for saying that. Are you really getting married next weekend? We really are. Paige nodded slowly. I think you're making the right choice, and I think I need to make some choices of my own. After she left, Marcus and I went back to our wedding planning. But I kept thinking about what she'd said about choosing the idea of someone over the reality. My family had chosen their idea of who I should be over the reality of who I was. And I'd spent years trying to become their idea instead of embracing my own reality. It felt good to finally choose myself. Friday afternoon, I was packing my suitcase for Colorado when my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw my entire family standing on my front porch like some kind of intervention squad. Mom was clutching a casserole dish. Dad looked nervous, and Paige appeared to have been crying recently. I opened the door, but didn't invite them in. What's going on? We came to apologize. Dad said the words sounding rusty, like he wasn't used to saying them. All of us. We've been talking, really talking for the first time in years. Sansani. Can we come in? Mom asked. Please, I made your favorite tuna casserole. Despite everything, the gesture touched me. Mom always made food when she didn't know how to express her emotions. I stepped aside and let them into my living room where wedding planning materials were still scattered across the coffee table. They sat down awkwardly, Dad perching on the edge of my armchair like he might need to make a quick escape. Mom set the casserole dish on my kitchen counter and returned, wringing her hands. Where do we start? Dad asked, looking around the room like the answer might be written on my walls. How about with the truth? I suggested. All of it. Dad took a deep breath. The truth is that I've favored Paige since you girls were little, and I never admitted it to myself until this week. The blunt honesty caught me off guard. I'd expected more deflection, more justification. Why? I asked. Because she reminds me of my sister Sarah, my little sister who died when she was 26. Car accident. His voice cracked slightly. Paige has the same laugh, the same way of lighting up a room. Being around her felt like having Sarah back. I'd heard about Aunt Sarah my whole life, but never knew she'd died so young. Dad, I never knew that. I didn't want to burden you kids with my grief, but I realize now that I punished you for being different instead of appreciating who you are. I made you feel like you had to compete with a ghost. Mom spoke up, her voice thick with tears. And I let it happen because I was afraid to contradict your father. I grew up in a house where my mother never questioned my father's decisions, even when they were wrong. I taught you that same dysfunction. Mine. I spent so many years feeling like I wasn't enough, I said quietly. Like if I could just achieve more, do more, be more, maybe you'd love me the same way you loved Paige. Lynn. Dad said, his voice breaking completely. I do love you. I love your dedication to teaching your kindness with children, your loyalty to people who don't deserve it. I love that you chose a profession that helps people instead of just making money. I was just too proud and too stupid to tell you any of that. Paige had been silent during this exchange, but now she spoke up. I broke up with Brett yesterday. The announcement hung in the air like a bomb. What happened? I asked. He wanted me to choose between him and the family. He said if I really loved him, I'd be willing to cut contact with all of you and start fresh. When I hesitated, he called me shallow and materialistic. He said I was just like you, Lynn, prioritizing family drama over our relationship. Just like me, Mon. His exact words were that you were a manipulative teacher who couldn't handle not being the center of attention, and I was headed down the same path if I didn't distance myself from your influence. The insult was so ridiculous that I almost laughed. He called me manipulative for standing up for myself. That's when I realized he didn't want a partner. He wanted someone who would never challenge him, never have opinions that conflicted with his, never have family loyalty that competed with his ego. Mom was nodding vigorously. Good for you, sweetheart. A man who asks you to choose him over family isn't worth choosing. But that's just it, Paige said, looking directly at me. I realized I'd been making the same mistake with family that Brett was making with me. I expected you to always give way, always be the understanding one, always put my needs first. I never considered that you might have your own dreams and needs that were just as important as mine. The acknowledgement felt like a weight lifting off my chest that I'd been carrying for years. The wedding fund, Paige continued. I'm giving it back. All of it. It was promised to you and taking it was wrong. I don't care about the deposits or the venue or any of it. Paige, you don't have to do that. Yes, I do. Not because you're demanding it, but because it's right. And because I want to start making decisions based on what's right instead of what benefits me most. Dad cleared his throat. There's something else. I've been seeing a counselor this week, Dr. Martinez downtown. She helped me understand some things about grief and favoritism and how I've been dealing with losing Sarah. The idea of my father in therapy was almost unimaginable. He'd always viewed emotional problems as weaknesses to be pushed through rather than addressed. That's really good, Dad. She wants to see all of us eventually. Family therapy, if you're willing. I looked around at my family, really looked at them. They all appeared exhausted, like they'd been through an emotional war zone. But they also looked different somehow, more genuine, less defensive. I'm willing to try, I said, but things have to actually change. This can't be just words that we all forget about in 6 months. They won't be, Mom promised. We've hurt you enough, Lynn. We want to do better. Marcus appeared in the doorway, having let himself in with the key I'd given him months earlier. May. Sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to make sure everything was okay. I saw all the cars outside. Everything's good, I said, and for the first time in a week, I actually meant it. Dad stood up and extended his hand to Marcus. Son, I owe you an apology too. I judged you based on appearances and assumptions, and that was wrong. You clearly love my daughter very much, and that should have been the only thing that mattered to me. Marcus shook his hand. I appreciate that, Frank. And for what it's worth, I understand why you wanted to protect Lynn. I want to protect her too. Are you still leaving for Colorado tomorrow? Mom asked. We are, I said firmly. We're still getting married the way we planned. But maybe, Paige said hesitantly, maybe we could plan a reception when you get back. Something to celebrate with the people who really love and support you. I looked at Marcus, who shrugged. It's up to you. I'd like that, I said. But only if it's actually about celebrating our marriage, not about making everyone else feel better about missing the wedding. It will be, Dad promised. It'll be about celebrating you and Marcus and the life you're building together. As my family prepared to leave, each of them hugged me with an intensity that felt different from our usual perfunctory family embraces. These felt like apologies, promises, and new beginnings all wrapped together. After they were gone, Marcus and I sat on my couch surrounded by wedding planning materials and leftover emotion. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Lighter," I said, and realized it was true. Like I've been holding my breath for 28 years and finally got to exhale. "Think they'll follow through on the changes?" "I think they'll try, and I think that's enough to start with." Marcus pulled me closer. "Ready to get married tomorrow, future Mrs. Sullivan, I've never been more ready for anything in my life. 6 months later, I was standing in my childhood backyard watching Marcus hang string lights between the oak tree and the back porch. The same porch where I'd realized I was done accepting less than I deserved. The same yard where Dad was now setting up tables for our reception, moving with the careful attention of a man who understood he had something precious to rebuild. Our Colorado wedding had been everything I'd dreamed of and more. Snow-capped mountains, intimate ceremony, professional photos that captured the pure joy on our faces. No family drama, no financial stress, no competing agendas. Just Marcus and me committing to a life built on mutual respect and genuine partnership. Mom appeared at my elbow carrying a plate of her famous chocolate chip cookies. "The caterer said the barbecue will be ready in about an hour. Are you nervous about tonight?" Not nervous," I said, watching 43 people mill around our backyard. "Just grateful. 6 months ago, I never would have imagined we'd all be here together like this." The guest list told the story of our new family dynamics. My teaching colleagues, Marcus's business partners, neighbors who'd become real friends, and family members who had earned their invitations through genuine change and effort. Paige walked over carrying a tray of lemonade, her face bright with the kind of happiness that comes from authentic contentment rather than external validation. She'd spent the months since her breakup with Brett focusing on her own growth, taking evening classes in interior design, and dating a quiet accountant who appreciated her intelligence rather than her appearance. "Dad's been practicing his toast all week," she said with a grin. "He's actually nervous about it." "Mom." "He should be nervous, I said. "This is his chance to publicly acknowledge years of favoritism in front of everyone we know. So, are you worried he'll mess it up, Mom?" "No," I said, and realized I meant it. "He's been doing the work. Dr. Martinez says he's made more progress in 6 months than most clients make in a year." The family therapy had been challenging but transformative. Each session forced us to confront patterns that had been decades in the making. Dad's grief over losing his sister Mom's learned helplessness, my own tendency to accept mistreatment rather than rock the boat, Paige's struggle with entitlement, and my struggle with self-advocacy. Marcus finished with the lights and walked over, putting his arm around my waist. "Your dad wants to know if it's okay to give his speech before or after dinner." "Before," I said immediately. "If he's going to get emotional, I'd rather it happen when people still have food to focus on." Dad approached us looking unusually formal in his best shirt and tie. "Lynn, can I talk to you for a minute?" We walked to the far corner of the yard near the garden where Mom had planted roses that were just beginning to bloom. "I've been thinking about what to say tonight," Mom, he said, his hands fidgeting with his tie. "And I realized that no speech can undo 28 years of making you feel less valued than your sister. But I wanted you to know that I see it now. I see how my grief over Sarah became favoritism toward Paige, and how that made you feel like you had to earn love that should have been freely given." "Dad." "Let me finish. I'm proud of who you've become, Lynn. Not just your teaching, not just your marriage, but your strength in standing up to us when we were wrong. You could have kept accepting our poor treatment to keep the peace, but you chose to demand better. That took courage I'm not sure I would have had at your age." The words hit me with unexpected force. This was the acknowledgement I'd been wanting my entire life. I also want you to know that Marcus is a good man who clearly adores you. I was wrong about him in every possible way, and I'm grateful he was patient enough to give us a second chance. Mom. He loves me, Dad. That's all you ever needed to know about him. I know that now. And I promise you, from this day forward, any man either of my daughters chooses to love will be welcomed based on how he treats her, not on how much money he makes or what kind of car he drives. As if summoned by our conversation, Paige's new boyfriend Derek appeared at the garden gate looking slightly overwhelmed by the crowd. He was the opposite of Brett in every way, quiet, thoughtful, more interested in listening than talking. He drove a 10-year-old Subaru and lived in a modest apartment, but he looked at Paige like she was the most fascinating person he'd ever met. Derek's nervous about meeting everyone, Paige said, taking his hand. I told him this family specializes in intense first impressions. I laughed. Just be yourself, Derek. We're all working on being more authentic around here. Sasanatanayin. As the evening progressed, I watched my family navigate this new dynamic with careful attention and genuine effort. Mom made sure to introduce Marcus to people as my son-in-law, the successful businessman, clearly proud to claim him. Paige spent time talking to my teaching friends, asking thoughtful questions about education policy and classroom challenges. Dad's speech, when it came, was everything I'd hoped for and more. He spoke honestly about his mistakes, publicly acknowledged the favoritism that had damaged our family, and committed to doing better. He thanked Marcus for loving me well and for being patient with a family that hadn't initially deserved his respect. Most importantly, Dad said, raising his glass toward Marcus and me, I want to celebrate my daughter Lynn, who taught us all that love isn't about accepting whatever you're given. Real love requires respect, effort, and the courage to demand what you deserve. Lynn, you made our family better by refusing to accept less than your worth. That's a lesson I'll carry for the rest of my life. The applause that followed felt different from typical wedding reception clapping. It felt like a community acknowledging growth, change, and the possibility of healing. Later that evening, as we cleaned up paper plates and folded tables, Marcus found me sitting on the back porch steps. Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Sullivan. Just thinking about how different this is from what I expected a year ago. I thought I'd always be the daughter who got less, who had to be grateful for whatever attention I could get. And now I know that I'm worth celebrating. I'm worth the full wedding fund, worth equal treatment, worth a man who chooses me every single day. It took me 28 years to learn that, but I finally got there. Marcus sat beside me, pulling me close. You know what I love most about our story? What? You saved yourself. Your family is doing better now, which is wonderful, but you didn't wait for them to change. You decided you deserved better and acted on that decision. That's the strongest thing anyone can do. T. As we sat on the porch where this journey began, I reflected on the lessons learned through months of conflict and growth. Real family love isn't about keeping the peace at any cost. It's about seeing each person clearly valuing their unique contributions and refusing to accept treatment that diminishes anyone's worth. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give your family is the courage to demand better, not just for yourself, but for everyone involved. When you stop accepting less than you deserve, you give everyone else permission to grow into better versions of themselves. 6 months ago, I thought standing up for myself would destroy my family. Instead, it saved us all. Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and demanding respect in your own family? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more real-life stories about finding the strength to value yourself. Share this with anyone who needs to hear that they deserve to be treated with love and respect, no matter what their family dynamics have been in the past. Thank you for listening to my journey from feeling less than to knowing my worth. I hope it reminds you that you deserve relationships built on genuine love and mutual respect, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to settle for anything less. Remember, you are worth celebrating exactly as you are.